This is Ryan McClanahan with historythroughcards.com. I hope you're all doing very well today. So I took some time off last week. I was ready actually to do a number of videos, and one I really wanted to get to was about Melot, and you will get that video. It's gonna be a kind of a pain in the neck though, but um, I had actually watched a video that Dustin, the personal sports card dad, did talking about his addiction to sports cards. And I really kind of had to step back and kind of examine my own collection and what I wanted to do with it. And I always go to my card collection when I'm having a bad day. And I really kind of like to sit down and check out my cards. And it's just not the card, it is the memory behind the card too. And, kind of like why I collect cards. It may be very different than why Dustin collects cards or some of the other YouTubers, why they collect cards as well. I'm in a different boat than any of those guys. I don't collect modern cards for the most part. I have a few in my collection because of Dakota from Sports Cards Anonymous. Uh, but um, I actually have talked to Dustin about this prior to his video. It kind of goes back maybe 2 years or so, or 3 years. I not sure that I had a uh, problem with addiction to sports card collecting, but I realized that it actually is a thing. Um, I had really realized that I may have a problem with collecting vintage sports cards, which is different than modern. I understand that you can be addicted to opening up packs of sports cards. I haven't opened up a pack of sports cards since I was a teenager, but I still remember the feeling that I got from doing it. Um, Maybe about a year ago, there was a YouTuber named George Wiley who did a video called How Basketball Card Collecting Nearly Destroyed My Life, The Dark Side of Card Collecting. And this was the first video that I actually came across that actually deals with this subject. And George Wiley had said that his marriage almost was destroyed because of it as well. And I had spoken to other collectors who are going to remain anonymous right now. Uh, One in particular said that his card collection almost destroyed his marriage. And another card collector told me that he was afraid that his wife uh, was going to leave him because of the cards that he was buying. He never told her how much he was paying for these cards. There are actually a lot of people out there who don't tell their wives or their girlfriends or the significant whomever what they pay for these cards because they think that they're not going to understand their hobby or their passion or what these cards sell for or what they purchase them for. They might not understand this. And I can kind of relate to this in a way because I used to have arguments with my grandmother about my vintage card collection. Now, she loved baseball and she didn't love baseball cards and she didn't understand why I was collecting them. She always thought that if the card was worth so much money, just sell the card. And I would always say, well, if I sell the card, 9 times out of 10, I won't be able to repurchase the card because it's going to go up in value. And so we would always go back and forth. And for me, addiction runs in my family. I always kind of saw cards in a different way than the majority of card collectors, I think, do. Um, I had a few choices, in fact. I started collecting vintage cards when I was 14 years old, and it was basically because of the 1994 strike. I wasn't happy with the players or the owners and I really wanted to collect cards. I still love baseball, Um, I loved baseball then. I probably always will love baseball. It'll be my first love, and then boxing, and will be my second, and maybe I don't know, football. Again, I have a really interesting history with sports and the ball players. A lot of the old time ball players, players who played in 1920s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, I used to do artwork for these players, so I would get to know them not just as players but as people. Because I am a journalist, I would interview them or their families as well, and I'd talk to them and I'd have friendships with a lot of these ball players. A lot of them, most of them are now passed on, but I got to know a lot of these players personally, and it only kind of added to my card collection why I collect these cards. And because I've never seen any of these players play, but I knew a lot of the ball players. That's kind of the difference, I think, between my collection, or why I collect and why other people collect cards. I have no idea. Uh, People collect cards for all sorts of reasons. I think a lot of people today, especially newer collectors, are getting into the hobby because of the money factor, the financial factor, what they can make off of cards, and a lot of dealers as well. Some dealers have told me that they don't care who the player is, as long as it's bringing them in money. And one of those people was Al Rosen, and I knew Al Rosen for about 20 years or so, or probably more than that, actually. And we used to have really interesting conversations. And I'd ask him, can I do an article on you? And he'd always say, if you do an article on me, I'll sue you. And I'm not sure if he was joking, but I kind of doubt it. Um, he was probably one of the first dealers that I'm aware of who jacked up the price of Mickey Mantle cards back in the 1970s and 1980s. And it is really interesting, uh, our hobby evolution, especially in the 1970s and 1980s. I'm not going to say that the 1930s through the 1960s was a dead time in the hobby. It wasn't. A lot of these things are not well covered. There's a lot of gaps in hobby history. I just read an article or two from Sports Collectors Digest from 1975 and 1980, and did a video on it. And so, what was really interesting in one of these articles was the fact that in 1980 there was a collector who had said he had just come out and told people that he was a card collector, and that he was really kind of afraid to do so prior to that, that people would not understand that he was collecting sports cards as an adult, and a lot of people kind of seem to think that card collecting is for kids as is baseball. Well, card collecting, as you guys well know, is not something just for kids. It was not started for kids. Now, kids did smoke, and cards were first issued in tobacco packages. Kids also were in the workforce as well in the 19th century up until about 1938. And so not only were kids as young as 5, 6, 7, 10 years old, in the workforce, but they were also smoking as well. So they were smoking. They were also collecting sports cards because they were in packs, and this contributed to a lot of collectors out there, but a lot of smokers as well. And that's I guess maybe another story for another time. But this is another reason why I collect and study sports cards. Now, for anyone who I guess doesn't understand, or somebody who's not a card collector, and I go and tell them, or if I'm on a first date or something like that with a nice lady, and she asks me, "So what do you do for a living?" And I say, "Oh, I study and I write about baseball cards." She'd be like, "Oh, check, please." And so it's a little kind of difficult for me sometimes to tell people that this is what I do. Um, and again, I do this because um, I want to learn, and it just isn't about the next card that I'm going to buy. Um, I really kind of had a very bad education growing up, and it was because I think of my disability. Cerebral palsy is what I have. Uh, it is really something that keeps me humble. And if I didn't have it, I probably would be a narcissistic bastard. And I really don't want to be that. And again, I have a choice, but I know who I am, and the funny thing is, Dustin, he knows who he is too. He realized that he may have a problem, and he had, at least I think, is doing something about it. And for the gentleman who I just referenced in that 1980 article, uh, he came out and said that I collect sports cards, and I, he kind of thought that maybe there was like 200,000 collectors out there, and a lot of them didn't want to tell anyone that they collected sports cards. I think it's very difficult for people to sometimes recognize that they may have an addiction, and this is why I think it was very important what Dustin did. Now, my hat's off to him because there are a lot of people who cannot recognize uh, that they have an addiction, and you can be addicted to anything. I come from an addictive background, not me personally. However, I do have an interesting story um, about addiction. I had lost my father to addiction, and by the time I was out of high school, I did not have parents. And I was very angry that I was being treated differently because of my disability and because I had a very bad education. Baseball cards really, I think, saved me. And that is an amazing statement. I realize this, but I had a choice. If the money that I was getting was going toward vintage baseball cards and sports cards, it was not going to alcohol or drugs. And I could have had every reason in the world to hang out with Mary Jane for a bit, or drink Budweiser, which I think is just Panther piss, or some other kind of drug, or end up in jail, or whatever the case may be. And I don't think it would be good. This is another reason why I collected sports cards, and I still do, vintage sports cards. And again, it gave me a opportunity to learn about things that I should have learned in school. So I think that uh, you know it was the right decision for me. And unfortunately, this kind of got a little out of hand. So during the pandemic, Real was kind of bored. It was kind of a crossroads, if you will, for me in my pursuit of sports cards and what I wanted to do going forward. There wasn't a whole lot to do. There was the lockdown. A lot of people were losing their jobs. Card collecting and uh, money was through the roof, right? And people were getting all sorts of money for these sports cards. But at the time, back in 2020, 2021, I really was on the fence about collecting anything related to a sports card, and that was because I had just lost one of my best friends. And they say is that people come and go, and it's a normal part of life. um, if you can count your friends on one hand, you've done very well. I had a really good friend named Bob. I've talked to you guys about him on another video, and he was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer in November, and by December he had died. And pancreatic cancer is it's got a very low survival rate. So I always tell people, always go to your doctor, get a full physical, and it can't do anything but help you out. And so you just never know what is going to happen from day to day. And this is one of the reasons why I always say, live life to your fullest. I had watched a video from Dakota from Sports Cards Anonymous, and he was really kind of, I think, having some issues balancing everything out. His collection, his family, his job, his YouTube content. And he's somebody I really enjoy watching as well as Dustin. I don't watch a whole lot of other content except those guys, and then Chris from Stories and Cardboard. I have no problem with any content that I do. I will never be bored. It's just that I'm not going to get content out there on a daily basis like Dustin, because I actually think the guy has a twin. But that's just me. What I think Dustin did was very important, and it also takes courage as well. Anytime that you're a YouTube content creator doing this, it does take some courage. For me, I am not the greatest speaker in the world. I say a lot and other things, and I'm not sure exactly if that has anything to do with my disability. Um, Cerebral palsy is a bitch sometimes, it really is, and it keeps me humble. Again, like I said, I'm very lucky. I am very lucky. First off, I'm very lucky to be alive. I don't take anything for granted. We take people for granted all the time. We don't mean to do that, but it's just human. I can walk, I can talk, I can hold down a job. I can't play sports anymore. I wish I did. Maybe bowling, maybe mini golf. But I do love the hobby, and I really love is meeting different people and hearing their stories. And so when I heard Dustin talk about this, I kind of tip my hat to the guy because he did again acknowledge that there is some issue and he knows himself, and we all need to kind of like take a time out from either YouTube or whatever and kind of step back and say, okay, like, am I doing the right thing here? And I always have to do this too whenever I write an article or really kind of speak on YouTube, do a video. Am I doing the right thing? And because I'm a journalist, I always have to have different sources for my articles. I take my journalism very seriously. I don't think that I would be here right now talking to you guys if it wasn't for Dustin as well. So the funny thing was is that Dustin's show was the first one I did as a guest speaker, and I really didn't have any plans to start my own channel. But Dustin kind of nudged me in that direction and thought maybe that I should have done something like this, and I am very glad that I did. Is it easy? Absolutely not. This is very difficult for me. Editing sucks. I hate to do it. It's worse than taking out the trash or doing the dishes, but I do it because I want to learn from you guys. I want to teach you guys a little bit about history, economics, science, whatever it has to do with a sports card or non-sports card. I find this stuff very fascinating. After Dustin had done his video, he got a lot of positive reviews on it, as he should. And um, John Mangini had done a video in response. Dakota, I think, did one as well, a little bit different. You guys definitely should check out both of those videos that those gentlemen did. And then Mike from Junk Wax Hero, he also responded as well, and I think they were very positive. That's kind of interesting. I wonder how many other people are in the same boat, and I don't think we're actually going to know because, again, there are a lot of collectors out there who are not really telling people how much they paid for their cards, and then willing to admit that maybe they have gone a little overboard. During the pandemic, I had seen something that may have been an addiction. I'm not entirely sure uh, how deep this went. But I got a little nervous because, for the most part, I had seen a video that Dustin did where he had talked about basketball card collecting. I never collected basketball cards as a kid. I collected a few. There was a set that I went after, the 1991 Skybox set, which I really love that set. The designs are awesome, and it really kind of brought me back memories to when I was a kid, and it's the reason why I went back and rebought the set after I had sold it to a buddy of mine. I had felt really bad about that too, and I never told my buddy about it. I really kind of regretted it. After seeing Dustin's video on basketball cards, I had decided that I really wanted to add a lot of these 1980s flair basketball cards to my collection, and then on top of it, I had never bought any 1971 or 72 tops basketball cards either, and these things were really, really cheap. That was the beginning, I think, maybe of an addiction. I'm not entirely sure, as I said. They were so cheap that I didn't keep track of how much that I was spending on them or just kind of ignoring it. Again, I also went into collecting vintage football, and that again is really cheap, which surprises me actually because football is just very, very popular. But because you can get Hall of Famers for a couple of bucks or future Hall of Famers for a couple of bucks, I really didn't keep track of what I was spending on these cards. So when I started to tally up all my receipts, I realized that I spent almost $1,000. That that really got me very nervous, and I immediately stopped. Just kind of slowed down and stepped back and said, "Okay, again, what do you want your collection to look like? You can't collect everything." And again, I've kind of bought here and there for the most part, but I think my hobby goals are changing or kind of shifting a little bit to really kind of be a better writer for you guys and to deliver better content in the future. This might not be possible. I am kind of limited because of my disability. Again, I wouldn't trade my disability for all the tea in China. I had thought about this pretty heavily, in fact. Um, I wouldn't change my disability. Again, it makes me humble. Um, I'm kind of a clod because of it, but again, I can walk, I can talk, I can hold down a job. It, it did affect my education, in the fact that teachers did treat me differently than my peers because of it. But baseball cards helped me get a better education, and I'm still learning. And it's really kind of only through new technology that we didn't even think of when I was a kid that you could do something like this. If you think about it, if you wanted to be on the radio or on TV, there are only two spots to do that. And now everybody can do this, which I think is really fantastic. I kind of say that sports cards really kind of saved me. And as amazing as that may sound, I don't really drink, I don't smoke, I don't screw around with funny females. I I'm very down to earth, and I put things into perspective as much as possible, and that's because of my training as a journalist. Um, I again take my hobby and my profession pretty seriously, especially my profession, because if I screw up, I could be sued or I could hurt other people. And I think also, during the week, I really kind of had thought that there needs to be at least a clause or something, a Hippocratic oath, if you will, for media members, for government officials, do no harm, right? My profession is precarious enough where they have done a lot of harm to a lot of people, and they're not really bringing information that they should. And this really gets me angry. It's another story for another time. That's not really related to addiction, but you guys can be addicted to anything. This hobby can be very addictive. Opening up packs can be very addictive. I can still remember opening up packs when I was a kid. Now the prices have changed. Again, the way we collect cards has changed greatly since I started collecting cards. Well, I started collecting modern cards, if you will. They're now vintage back in 1982, and then in earnest in 1984, and then in 1994 I shifted over to vintage card collecting. I started doing portraits of these ball players back in high school, and so it's been about 30 years or so that I have been an artist, and so I got to know a lot of these ball players off the record as well, if you will, and I did a lot of interviewing them and getting to know them as people. And so my vintage card collection is also based on the people that I have met, the ball players that I have met. And, guys like Dom DiMaggio, Bob Feller, Bobby Dorr, Johnny Pesky, all those guys that are now no longer with us. This is also a memory for me as well, not just a card collection. And so there's different aspects of, again, why I collect it. It's like an onion. It's multi-layered, if you will. There's just no one reason. Maybe the biggest one, as I said, is because of my education. These cards have given me a opportunity to relearn things that I should have learned or learn something completely different. I wouldn't trade it for the world. As I say, if it wasn't for Dustin, I probably wouldn't be on YouTube at all. I wouldn't have gained a different type of knowledge of doing all of this. So when Dustin asked me to do a interview with him, that was the first one I've ever done, and I think that was in 2021. And then he kind of nudged me in the direction of doing my own channel, and along the way, I've had to learn how to do everything associated with a channel and video, and I'm not good with production or anything like that. And as I say, I hate editing, although I do edit quite a bit. And this is always time consuming. And I don't mind really doing this. It's a part of the job. And I get to learn different tricks of the trade, if you will, along the way. And, with everything else, everything is a learning process. There are learning curves to everything. And being a journalist, I didn't go to school for journalism. It runs in the family, as I've told you guys. My grandfather was a journalist. His father was a journalist. My father was not a journalist. It's kind of something that I've carried on, the quote unquote family tradition of journalism. But with that, there has to be some kind of accountability to what you write, to what you report. And unfortunately, today we're seeing very little of that. And it's something that I take full responsibility for my actions. My sports cards, and what I report to you guys. I'm not always correct, and I don't want to be. That would suck to be perfect. It really would. It would kind of ruin the experience of being human. The hobby allows you to have all sorts of opportunities to learn, to pick up new cards. Maybe there's cards that you've never seen before, so you have to do research on those cards. The other thing I really enjoy about the hobby is that I get to spend it with people that I enjoy. I do like to talk to people. I like to talk about cards and history and economics and other things associated with a card, which is one of the reasons why I do this, and another reason why I write. And you never know who you're going to bump into in the hobby, or what kind of card you're going to add to your collection. Do so responsibly. If you think that maybe you have a problem with collecting cards. There are people that you can talk to. I know there isn't really any Sports Cards Anonymous. Well, there is Dakota from Sports Cards Anonymous, but I don't think that he'd really appreciate all these card collectors going to his channel and saying, "Hi, I'm Bob. I have a problem with sports cards." Uh, there is really no addiction helpline for sports cards, but there are people that you can talk to. Um, you're not alone. There are other people who are in the same boat, and I'm always around to help you guys out as well. I'm just an email away. So, again, guys, thank you so much for stopping by. I greatly appreciate this. This is a fascinating topic. I think it's something that should be talked about a little bit more than it is. And maybe it is, I'm not sure. Again, you just never know in life where it's going to take you. And for me personally, it took me to a card shop when I was in the fourth grade to learn about math and problem solving skills, and eventually led me to become a writer and to have a YouTube channel. And you guys got to check me out saying and all sorts of other goofy crap that I do. But again, I enjoy this, and I'm very fortunate that I can do something like this. It does take a lot of courage sometimes for YouTubers to do this. This is not easy. I can't imagine that somebody says today that I'm going to be a writer or I'm going to be a YouTube content creator. A lot of YouTube content creation and being a writer in general kind of forces people to open up and kind of allow themselves to be vulnerable, if you will. And for a lot of people, uh, that's really impossible for them to do. It's one of the reasons why I'm very glad that Dustin did what he did, and it took a lot of courage for him to do that, I am sure. And this also takes me a little bit of courage to get in front of you guys on a sometimes weekly basis to talk about sports cards and the history of the ball players and whatever else that I want to talk about. So, again, guys, thank you so much for stopping by. I greatly appreciate it as always. And I always love to have a good dialogue with you guys and see what you guys have to talk about. And I will talk to you later. Bye.